Hi, everybody. So we talked about fire stopping. We talked about the reasons for fire stopping. We don't want fire to spread. We don't want smoke to spread. We want to try to contain it. We want to keep it in a compartment. Sorry, that's my dog. We want to, if there's a fire in a compartment, we want to contain it to that compartment. We don't want any air drafts to pull air, create a chimney effect, and pull smoke or fire out of a fire compartment. We want to keep it in that compartment. And the way we can achieve that is by putting in fire stopping and smoke seals around. For the electrical industry, it's around cables, it's around raceways, it's around cable tray. It's around boxes, device boxes. And so here we've got, we had this slide earlier. This is the fire separation itself, but now we've got these boxes and a light box. And what about if we put a raceway through the wall? How do we deal with it? What do we do? And even so, like, as when you're working on a project and you're going through that project under new construction, you've got a book, you've got a reference, you know what the wall is. So it's pretty easy to deal with. But if you're doing a service job, working in it as a service tech, and you got to run a cable from point A to point B, and you happen to go through one of these fire separations, or you go through horizontally or vertically, you must ensure that the integrity of that firewall is put back into place. We've already discussed this. So how do we do it? Well, I'm just going to stop here for 1 second, and please know that I am not endorsed by any of these products I'm going to show. I have just found this on the internet, and I know they are very easy to work with, and it is a name that we quite often hear with fire stopping. And I found their website very easy to work through. And the information there is pretty simple to find. And when you're dealing with fire stopping, there's particulars and there's a listing that you have to follow. So you'll hear the word listing a lot and when you're dealing with fire stopping. And what is a listing? A listing is that piece of paper that you have, a document showing the assembly for, we're going to say, a raceway, and going through a gypsum wall that could be a 2-hour fire rating. And we have to look at how we're going to deal with that fire separation. What do we put in it? We can't just go by silicone and do it. We have to use an appropriate product to put into that space. Do we just fill the whole thing up with that whole void and fill it up? No, we have to pack some of it with a wool. And when we pack it in, then we have to allow so much space for the sealant itself. And if the raceway is tight against the drywall, you have to allow for sealant to be stand proud around that point. You can't just smear it off and have just a smidge there, and it's not effective. So where do you find this stuff? How do you get this stuff? And here's some examples right now, and this is an example of how not to do it. Basically, they've just run everything in there. I think you can see light through here. Yeah, this is a bad example. I think this is an old fire stop or an old hole between a communication closet, and somebody's just added more stuff to it, and in fact did try to fire stop it. There's more than one way. You can use a sealant or you can use a fire stop collar. Now, the other thing too, if you use a fire stop collar, it may not recommend that you install a caulking underneath it. So the two are two different products, two different listings, and they may not work together. So you must ensure that if you're doing one, you don't need the other. And here's some cable tray, or basket tray as we like to call it. And it's got these tubes that it runs through. And the idea with these tubes is that if there ever is a fire, this stuff will all collapse. It will collapse and expand. And it will fill that void. Everything will be full. And then it's hard to see because it is a reflection. This is a piece of steel above it. And floor penetrations for multiple cables. They make pads that would have to be kept in place. Wall penetrations, and the beauty of stuff like this for data cables and for any kind of cabling is that you can access this afterwards. This is not it's not held in place. There is room that if you need data cable, like, hey, we all know in our industry, there's always got to be room for one more cable. So that's kind of the idea behind these products. In the event of a fire, they will close up. Here's a plug that you actually can just put into a wall. This is something that I've never seen done, but I think it's a great idea. Somebody has gone through a raceway through a wall, and they've fire stopped it. And they've actually got, it's actually a note that you can leave there. And you can, so it's the date installed, name of installation, inspected by. Because as the electrician, if you're doing this on your own, you kind of need to know what you're doing. And it might be nice to leave that behind for the next person as well. And here's multiple cables. And this is a very common sight. You'll see raceways with fire stop and sealing all around it. Now, the interesting one with this is they've done a great job here, but if this is just going through the wall, they actually need to seal this as well. And one of the things that I hear from building inspectors quite regularly, and as an electrician, something that you should note, that when you're installing, core line is typical. We'll see core line dumped into communication closets. And trim the core line off. Trim it off to whatever you need it to be out of the ceiling, because that fire stop has to go back to where the concrete is. You can't just put fire stop in the end of a plastic raceway, a non-metallic raceway, because the raceway will burn off. And the idea is that you want to keep any flames or creating chimney effects or smoke propagation going from one space to another. You want to keep that to a minimum. So core line is one that I know does come up regularly. Sometimes you'll see pieces of core line that could be up to a foot long. And they're just pulling communication cables through it, especially in apartment buildings. We see this regularly. And they get everything all done. They put a little bit of fire sealant in the end of it, and they think it's done, and they actually got to remove it. So this should have some kind of fire caulking if it is going to another fire compartment, which in this case I think it probably is. And this is, it looks like a different compound here. But wherever these cables are coming from, they definitely are sealed up. It looks like this is actually grouted in. And here's a box with putty packs. Now, also like I mentioned earlier, keep in mind that there are putty packs that may look like a fire stop, but they could be acoustic. So it's something to remember. And let's just stop there for a minute. And now let's go. How do you find this stuff? And that's the big thing. How do you find this information? How do you go about finding your listing? How do you find out what you got to do, what you have to do? And I'm sure probably all of you that have been in the industry for a while know how to do this. This was kind of new to me when I started to look at this, and I've actually just been playing around on the computer just looking at this stuff, and it is easier to find than I thought. So especially if you're taking on the responsibility for this fire stop and in a wall there's a fire separation. So what we have to do is, I'm going to use Hilti because I like Hilti. I'm not endorsed by Hilti, but I just found their stuff really easy to work through. So if we go to, and this is right off their website, you can have a free account here. This is all I've done. And the other thing too, many years ago, and I'm not trying to toot Hilti's horn, and I've heard that the other fire stopping manufacturers will do it as well, is they will provide a meeting for you. They'll provide an education lesson for you. They will tell you about their product, and that's not just how great their product is, but how to work with their product. It's not just like going to Home Depot and buying a tube of a product to fill a hole. There's more to it than that. So if we're going to do a fire stop selector, so this is what we're going to do here, and we're just going to start to look here. So we're going to do guided because, and I've already gone through this. Guided is I'm going to follow somebody else's directions. So they are providing all this for me. Now we're given some types. So you've got a joint. So a joint could be two products coming together. But what we deal with mostly in our part of the industry is a penetration. Whether it's a through penetration, partway through the penetration, as such as a box on one side of a wall but not the other. Or it could be a floor penetration from the floor of one space to the ceiling of another space. And it'll give us through penetrations, it'll give us an opening, a membrane. So this is a piece of pipe coming up and out one side. Mixed, so this could be different things. I mean, I see cable trays, I see cables bundled together, I see pipes that are clad. But let's just look at it through penetration. So through penetration could be any of these products, and they just happen to have cables in here, cable bundle, cable tray. I think this would work for our trade. And it's got conduit and tube. So, and it's got non-metallic conduit and metallic conduit. So how do we deal with this stuff? I mean, we're not supposed to use PVC in an insulated wall, so we have to stay away from that. But there's no restrictions around ENT. They can use that inside a building. So let's go to conduit. Steel, so we've got plumbing in here, we've got steel conduit. And we have one specific for EMT. I learned a lot of this by just playing on this site just the other day. And then it talks about insulation. Well, our EMT quite often does not have an insulation. And now the next question is, we are going through a floor or a wall. So let's first pick a wall. And then it's going to say, is it a mass timber wall, concrete wall, gypsum wall, and a gypsum fire shaft. Let's just say it's going to be let's go through a gypsum wall. That's very common. Now we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 hour fire ratings. Well, if it's really hard if you don't know what the ratings could be. But a lot of walls are based on a 2 hour fire separation. So I'm not 100% certain on what a 1 hour is, a 2 hour is, a 3 hour is, a 4 hour is. So it's something that would have to be kind of looked at. I may actually add one more little video on to the end of this if I can. I'm going to dig this up and see what I can find. But for now, let's just go with a 2 hour fire rating. So now we've got all of these products, and this shows all of these products that we can use. And each of these products that we use, it can change how the listing works. So now let's just go and look here, and let's go through a through penetration, see what we can find. So this is just a straight through penetration. So is this. And this is all for this type here. As you can see, if I move along here, all my listings change. And this looks like this is a compound that fills the whole space. And just by looking at this here, these diagrams. And okay, so let's just pick on, let's pick on something simple here. Let's see what this is. Oh, preview. There we go. So now it's going to show us the product that this is. The list part of the listing is the product. But now let's go to this, and I've found it here under the PDF. So this is the listing here. Oh, there, and it always fills up over here. It is the 1095. Yes, there we go. So here it is here, and as you can see, this is an opening with multiple raceways in it. It is a wall assembly, and system number WL1095. So if you had multiple raceways on CANTRUST, this is the way that you could go through the wall. It is a 1 or 2 hour fire rating, and CAN-ULC, so Canada and ULC out of the US recognize this. So this is a 1 hour and 2 hour fire rating. Now, this is where it will talk about what the product is and what this is here and what this will be. Now, if we look at 1 is the wall assembly. It's a 1 or 2 hour rated gypsum wallboard, and its studs, wood framing may consist of wood or metal studs. Gypsum board is 5/8. So it actually gives the actual width of the gypsum board, and then it goes on to, so 1A is the space. This is the framing members inside here. B is the gypsum board, and thickness, number of layers, and fastener type orientation is under a U400 series design. And then we run this 1-inch EMT through it. And then it goes on to say 1 or more 1-inch 25 millimeter diameter steel electrical tubing. The annular space between is a minimum of 1/2 inch up to a 1 inch. So you also have to keep in mind when you actually do your installation through a fire stopped opening that you can't just have a large space, I'm going to say a large, because in here they are talking 1/2 inch up to a max of 1 inch. So you could not have more than 1 inch between 2 raceways. So you have to be very conscious of that. And then fill void or cavity material sealant, 2 hour fire rating. Thickness of material applied within the annulus flush of both surfaces of the wall, a 1 hour fire rating, minimum 5/8 thickness, and fill material applied with the annulus flush with both surfaces of the wall. And that is this here, 3. So that is all, and you do both sides. So this is the view being right on it, and this is what looking at it would look like, and this is, you would have this flush here. I mean, you wouldn't be able to trowel this off on the inside, but you have to make sure it is the whole penetration. And here's another example that I pulled off earlier, just having a look. And again, this gives you the instructions, and if you follow the instructions, you've done it properly. So when And this is the other thing too, is you could get asked for this listing for this wall. Because it's in electrical code, you could get asked, what is the fire stopping for this penetration? And you would have to be able to provide this piece of information. And then once you showed it and could prove to us that you, my understanding is that I've never gone looking in fire separations. My understanding is you kind of have to take your word for it unless you do a test. On a large project, an engineer may do a test, do 10, may destroy 10 penetrations, just to make sure that you've got enough sealant in there, into that space. And again, so here's your product. Through penetrations 1 or more 2-inch diameter or smaller, rigid steel conduit or EMT to be installed within the opening. So again, it's an EMT or a rigid steel. And fill void or cavity material, foam, fill material applied with the annulus flush with both sides of the wall. So this is actually, you're filling this whole space up. Well, I've learned a lot by just digging through this stuff. The information that you need is out there. It's not rocket science. It can be a little intimidating, I agree. And so here's another one here. This is what I was actually talking about earlier. So see how this raceway here is actually sitting on this bottom edge. Well, you can't get sealant in that bottom edge, so to achieve a fire stop there, you actually put a bead on the outside, and that bead has to be a specific depth to achieve a true fire stop. So you can't go and have a massive 10-inch hole and a 1/2-inch raceway running through it. That just won't work. There's minimums and maximums with this stuff too. So when you can always print these off. It's a good idea to know what you're doing. It's a good idea to make sure that you ensure that you do it to whatever the listing is. Because realistically, you take on that responsibility when you're doing the work. And here's a different one again. Again, I've just been looking at 1 or 2 hour fire ratings. So I think it's pretty safe to say that a 2-hour fire rating, if you already do everything as a 2-hour fire rating, it would also cover anything that is basically a 1-hour fire rating. And then you can also go through, and so if we come back to here and we go back through penetrations again, we can do it through penetration. And let's go back to EMT and no insulation. Let's go through a floor and concrete floor. And let's do a 2-hour fire rating. And again, it depends on the product that you're taking. I mean, they've got cans in here too, a cast in place can. And so let's look at this one. So this is got 2 products you're going to use here. You're going to use the FS1 Max and mineral wool. Oh, that's that one still. And it is not letting me bring it up. I think I may have been sitting in the site too long. Oh. No, not everything's perfect. Oh, they're there. Look at them all. Did it down this way. Okay. So here is the top view looking down on it. And so here we've got 3 is a duct wrap material. So that's actually wrapped. And this here is for, you kind of have to read what each one is. Steel pipe, on iron pipe, conduit, 4-inch diameter or smaller, EMT, duct wrap material, minimum of 2 layers, a minimum of 1.5 inches, so it tells you how to do it. And so that is on the upper portion. And then we've got 4B, which is this top layer here. And 4B is the firestop, fill void, cavity material sealant. So this is using the sealant now. And under that is a packing material. And the packing material is mineral wool bats. And so this is all mineral wool bats in here, just stuffed in here. And then the firestop is poured over top. And then there is these wraps that go around these raceways. That's how all of this works. So this assembly is tried and true. And if you do it to this method, it is approved. It is considered to be a compliant installation. A lot of testing goes into this. There's a lot of science that goes into this. So I think we kind of have to take it for granted. Don't just take the sealant and do what you think is right. Ensure that if you're doing it, that you do have, and there maybe you just do walls usually going through to our fire separation. You may have it dialed right in and know exactly how to do it. So I'm going to leave it there now. So I think that's pretty much it for this video. Remember that it does fall on us because it is an electrical code. And that's what it does come down to. We do have a responsibility. And as soon as I can find the rule, here it is here. Because we do have a responsibility, we do have to make sure it is done properly. All right. Thank you very much.